Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this should have been LinkedIn Live. We're having a few technical difficulties today, but that is not stopping this party. My name is Dr. Lisa Greenhill. I serve as the Chief Organizational Health Officer at the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges, and I will be your moderator for today's session on women in in the higher education C-suite. What is important in this moment? I am joined by my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Lisa Takami, author of Women in the Higher Education C-Suite, Diverse Executive Profiles, and the wonderful, amazing Dr. Jane Conoley, President Emerita of California State University, Long Beach. Thank you for joining me today, ladies.
Lisa,
Very
thank you
happy to be
so
here.
much for serving as our moderator. And Dr. Connolly, thank you for gracing us with your presence and with your experience, which was really the touchstone for this event. So, Dr. Connolly is among the 11 remarkable women whose personal and professional trajectories comprise the contents of my book. And upon Dr. Connolly's retirement, she sent me a very lovely letter, and there was a lot in one section of that letter that I thought warranted an opportunity for discussion and to be unpacked. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that and ask her to respond to it. Life in higher education is particularly challenging now. We're in need of strong leaders to hold on to critical values while changing to meet environmental demands. That's not a new challenge, but the urgency has certainly been intensified. So, with that, Dr. Connolly, I'll turn it over to you and ask you to unpack those particular words.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for reading what I sent you. That feels like a victory right there. Yeah. I've had, of course, I was actively president for 11 years and just took on the Emerita status just this past August, so feel pretty close to it. And what I was trying to communicate there was that certainly it's always a leader's job to, know what the touchstone, the North Star is, that's our mission, that's what we're doing. But it's also our job to understand that we're not perfect organizations and that we depend on the people, environments, and institutions around us. And I think this particular time is coming toward us with an unbelievably, quick. I mean, the last few months of my presidency, I'd say from January 2025 until I separated to the presidency, I felt like there was no time to take a breath before another letter would come, or another guidance, or another threat, or another grant uh, canceled on us. Uh, but I kept trying to think, these are signals. We can't just act like there's nothing that we need to change. And so that's really what I was trying to communicate is let's take this as not that we throw away our core values, but that we look to see where there might be relevant areas where we could match what the 21st century population really wants us to be.
Very interesting to hear about the challenges on the financial side of grants being canceled, which reminds me of the way in which presidents like you and many others needed to pivoted in the very uncharted territory of COVID-19. And I'm wondering, before I turn it back to Lisa, if you called on any of the lessons from that time as you were wrapping your presidency. I know that I tried to schedule a lunch to take you out to celebrate that retirement, and there wasn't an occasion. And I knew that that was part and parcel of any president's retirement, but I also knew in this particular climate, there was probably much that was taking place that was separate from the fact that you were in the process of retirement. So if you could speak to that, and then I will turn it back to Lisa.
Yeah, well, thank you. What you mentioned, the COVID time, that really was another kind of startling and milestone in my leadership journey. Uh, I think we relied in the last several months. We met more often, our team. We sought external expertise like we did in COVID. During COVID, we actually made our medical director part of our executive team so that we had her with us all the time. But we talked more to our federal relations people, tried to really get an understanding of what was really happening. Remember, I'm talking to you from California, which has certainly a whole list of challenges, but it's a little bit more protected from the political
Mhm.
pressures that I know other presidents felt, that I heard from them if they were in Indiana or other states where the legislature was coming after them too. So I think more meetings of the executive group, the inclusion of some more expertise, and the decision, which I think was important, that I think we were using the old British term, stay calm and carry on,
Mhm.
that we were not going to stop anything we were really doing that we knew was important.
Hmm.
And we toyed with the idea we might have to rename something,
Hmm.
but and we gave people a chance to, if they had a title that looked like it put them in crosshairs, did they want to change their title? But the good thing was we all agreed we're just going to keep doing it.
Yes.
And I don't want to take all the time, but remember in California we have Proposition 209,
Yep.
Right.
which has since the 1990s forbidden us to ever use race or gender or any other protected status for a preference or prohibited discrimination. So that was our kind of touchstone. We
Hmm.
we haven't been doing it. We're not doing it now,
Mhm.
but we must meet the needs of our students.
Correct.
And we have students who are, from artists to autism,
Hmm.
from athletes to mobility challenge. And they all need different programs. And
Yeah.
so
Correct.
I'll stop there. But
So the
yeah.
work continues. Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah. Yes, yes. So, Lisa, I kind of want to revisit just for a moment or two your book, which came out, I believe, in 2023.
Hmm.
Paul, yeah.
Hmm.
So what was the motivation to write that book? And what was a big common thread that ran through those profiles?
Yeah, there were several motivations. I'd had the good fortune to write articles on women leaders in the journal Women in Higher Education for about 10 years. And so I had some content and some important relationships, including the relationship with Dr. Conoley. And I saw the opportunity in the marketplace. There hadn't been a book written on women C-suite leaders in about a generation. And so there was really an opportunity as I pitched publishers to bring to the marketplace the as mentioned the personal and professional trajectories, the trials and the triumphs of 11 remarkable women leaders. During the pandemic, I also made a pivot in my career, which is that I was recruited by an executive recruiter to step into an educational C-suite role, but not in public higher education, which has been where I gained all of my own education as well as where I've worked. And it was really tough. And I experienced some of the glass cliff effect that Dr. Catrice Albert mentions in the book. I certainly experienced discrimination on the basis of gender. I would say it was fair time for misogyny. I was in a white male dominated field where they had very much welcomed me as their first COO and excited at the experience and the perspectives that I brought. But once in there, realized that they really weren't ready and or really receptive to what I had to offer and what I saw as needs. And so I was very curious once I made the decision to leave that role and return to the California community colleges where I continued to proudly serve as director of the community college technical assistance provider, is I really did want to cull some of those success stories. And so some of the themes that came out from these very diverse 11 women who, like Dr. Conoley, served at large research institutions, and women like Dr. Sandra Bohem, who serves as president of a tribal college in Montana. So what were those common threads? And several of them came forward. One of them was the role of mentors. So Dr. Conoley speaks very specifically about mentors who were key in her career, both men and women. She names them. Others in the book, while they do not name their mentors, say that they've had different mentors at different times. One said that she's had the very same mentors for the entire arch. So that was certainly one component. Another component that Dr. Conoley mentioned, Dr. Bonham mentioned, was being a yes woman, saying yes to opportunities that may not have necessarily been in mind or on the track, but nevertheless circuitously led them to the presidency. Another one that I like to touch on is the importance of a trusted a trusted set of advisors to lean on that may not be in your institution, and certainly consistent and continuous professional development to grow the skill set beyond the doctorate degree, which is, of course, kind of the basement level for women in the C-suite. And so those are some of the themes. I would encourage anyone to read the book. You do not need to be someone who aspires to the C-suite to get tidbits about how to advance your own career, because there are lessons learned and a comprehensive set of resources for anyone who's interested in advancing their career in higher education. So thank you.
Yeah, great. So I kind of also want to just hear, and if you had to choose one word in this questions for both of you, and Jane, we'll start with you, to describe the current kind of emotional leadership climate, if you will, for this moment that we're in, what would it be? And so we'll go to Jane, then Lisa, and then I'll share my word.
Yeah, that's challenging. I guess the first word that comes to my mind is vigilant,
Mm,
because
mm,
there's surprising things,
yeah,
like what we thought we knew, we don't know anymore.
yeah,
What I thought I knew about First Amendment rights, I'm not sure I know anymore. So
yeah,
I think vigilant is what comes to my mind.
great word. Lisa.
I would say aware and resourceful. So I am based in Orange County. We had our marketing communications department in June put out comprehensive cards and different protocols because we were quite concerned about ICE agents arriving
Mm,
in our parking lot and what we would need to do. So again, echoing Dr. Connolly's word vigilance, but resourceful because I serve at a unique standalone non-credit institution, one of three colleges in the North Orange County Community College District. And one of the things that I do well is to generate revenue. And while I don't consider myself a development officer, I consider myself a program officer, really. I do have talent in that area. And because our institution, like many, is tight in terms of budget, because a great number of our students are non-credit ESL students, right?
mm,
Those students were afraid to leave their homes
yeah,
starting in June. And so I've made it my business to identify and bring forward to our president any and all opportunities that I thought would align. And when we are done here today, I will be fully focused on a major grant opportunity that I brought to the college's attention. And we are working collaboratively, very closely to submit that in order to, to preserve what NOCE does very well and to provide those on-ramps to our most vulnerable students to our higher education ecosystem in the state of California.
yeah. Um, Great words. My word is exhausted. I'm tired.
That's another
One
good,
thing
that's a
about
very accurate word. Yeah.
one thing about Lisa Takami, she knows I'm gonna keep it 100 all the time. I'm tired. It's been one of the most challenging years uh, of my career. I'm on my third title this year. This one sticks though, we hope. But every time I turn around, there is something new to kind of cope with. Right, whatever that is. There's always something new. Oh, we have to change our committee name because we want to remain an eligible PSLF or nonprofit organization. And I just actually got loan forgiveness a year ago. Woohoo! But I could not in good conscience have still have DEI stuff all over our stuff, even though that's what we're passionate about is a core value. But I also need to take care of my people,
Yeah.
right? And we have a lot of recent grads. And so, these are, it was just, there's just a never ending kind of deluge of stuff that, we have to kind of cope with. So, yeah, my word is exhausted. So I'm looking forward to a bit of a break.
I'm not an expert on popular culture, but it reminds me of the movie that was so popular just recently, Everywhere, Everywhere,
Everything all at
All
once.
at
Yes.
Once. That I have had that kind of
Yes.
movement of awareness.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're seeing, of course, a continuous, nonstop rise of political polarization, affecting higher ed in so many ways, not only kind of the budget cuts, but potential threats to research, governance, and kind of the very concept of shared governance, academic freedom, all of these kinds of things. And so, Jane, I'm really kind of curious about your thoughts on, as, a woman in the C-suite, what about those optics? Because there's certainly optics associated with women leaders, right? I'm also kind of very, very mindful that, the recent quote from Michelle Obama, because folks are like, oh, are you ever going to run for president? She's like, we are not ready for that. No, stop asking me, right? Uh,
Yeah. I was sorry to hear that, but she
right.
knows better than I.
Yeah. So, how did you manage and how do you continue kind of thinking about leadership when every decision is, again, so scrutinized very specifically through a political lens, and when gender is a difference in gender is present, it seems to be exacerbated.
Yeah, and that's tough. I think there's a new book just out, and I wish I had written it all down, where the a former president wrote a book and urges current presidents to be a little bit more reticent about what they talk
Mm,
about.
mm,
But my focus has been now, at least for the last year, is really just on data. I'm not going to talk to you about the politics. I'm not going to talk to you about what used to be, but I'm going to talk to you about our graduation rates, how many applications we're getting, what our yield rate is, how many my students need they need support on basic needs or mental health. So I am a bit more reticent than I used to be. But in our group of 21 other presidents in the CSU system, I have a unique and wonderful support group.
mm.
And we have talked to each other sometimes about we need to speak out more on this, and that's a good feeling that others may not have uh, access to. So it's a little bit of a combination of trying to knowing that every decision is political. I mean, even
Yeah.
graduation rates are political, right? But trying to not like bring that into the conversation and just keep, flooding the zone, as an expression has been created, with the numbers about our university. And
Mm,
recently we talked about economic impact, in terms of 2 point something billion dollars of economic impact, and how many jobs we have, and just things that people can really grasp, not so much about we got this grant on XYZ, but we hired this many people. So that's what I've been doing.
yeah. Yeah. And Lisa, Jane just kind of talked about this group of other presidents that she, was able to kind of turn to for support. And, there's been so much talk about programs, especially kind of DEI programs being dismantled. And certainly as educators, we're very concerned about our students, but we also kind of neglect to acknowledge in these conversations that leaders also need these kinds of spaces for psychological safety to talk about things, to kind of figure things out for peer mentoring, which never ends, right? Peer mentoring never ends. And so, where are you finding community and that safety in this moment?
Yeah, so I feel very fortunate in that I work for a community college district in California that has DEIA a policy written into it in its board and administrative policies. And we are led by a chancellor and governed by a board of members across the political spectrum. But because those board policies, administrative policies, were added to our governance years ago, and the values and the programs that have emanated from them, I think we're unique and we're lucky. Now, that doesn't suggest that I, as a leader, doesn't, that I don't need support. I'm very fortunate in terms of the inclusive excellence that is in the fabric of the institution, where I have the privilege to serve. I turn to mentors that I've had for many years. I turn to peers like you. I turn to friends and family. I'm in a period where professionally I feel very supported and where I can bring the very best of what I do to work on a daily basis. Personally, I'm going through a very challenging time. I lost my father in early October, and my mom is in her last days of life. And so in that same in that same setting, I turned to those mentors, colleagues, and friends who supported me when I was really experiencing some of the worst of the glass cliff effect when I was in a different role during the pandemic. So I'd say whether the challenges come on the professional side or the personal side, the structures, the lessons, and the themes that are drawn out from the leaders, including Dr. Conoley in the book, is to have I think Dr. Garcia put it, and she was quoting a Susan Taylor book that you need to have a row of people in the front row of your life, in the theater of life of your life, who are there when you have a political or other very challenging situation at work where you may need insight, or where you may have something going on in your personal life where you may need support. I'm reminded of reaching out to Dr. Conoley when she was in some very challenging negotiations with faculty at Cal State Long Beach. I also remember another occasion where I was interviewing her for the book, and she talked to me about her communication style as a psychologist with her team, and saying, if I seem distracted, I want to let you know I've got something going on. So if I seem distracted, please circle back to me. And not sort of not by coincidence, a number of the 11 women featured in the book are psychologists by training.
Somehow I didn't realize that, but I've often said I don't know how people do this job if they didn't go to psychology school. But obviously, that's just my somewhat myopic thing. I think the finding and building and nurturing the people around you, your professional team, your family, and those community members, it's time well spent, even though it's time. Um, Sometimes even about my own executive leadership team, sometimes I think, well, they're also, high level. They don't need my, special interventions about team building. But the fact is they do, because they're going through um, the stresses in their particular areas. And, whether it's student affairs or financial affairs or, now with our information technology, all that going on, the person in charge of athletics, I mean, imagine all the things that they are dealing with. So kind of that shared understanding that we're all in it together has really helped me.
Lisa, you're muted.
So we do have a question from the hinterlands here. So, and this question for both of you, I'm kind of curious to hear your responses. But Jane, in your interview in Lisa's book, you mentioned the need to kind of get that professional development and learning about higher ed finance, right? And the wacky thing, as somebody who collects higher ed finance data, a dollar is counted differently everywhere. Like, and it's counted differently everywhere every year. It's a little bit different. And so it was a really new area for you as you stepped into, different kinds of leadership roles. What, and again, that's not unique to your experience. What can we do to help the next generations of women in the C-suite kind of get some of this professional development training earlier in the career so that they're not, I mean, we're all kind of learning on the job a bit, but how do we kind of better prepare people for these roles?
Yeah, well, we had taken a stance over the past now 10 years that we were sending our, high level faculty or our current administrators or directors of program, we were sending them to training that was available nationwide.
Mm,
And the CSU system has had its own kind of leadership program, and we have our own on campus that we call Leadership Fellows.
mm,
So we really were investing quite a lot of money into a program and sending people other places. And financial acumen was part of most of those. And I would often cue people to say, ask questions about that, because that was really an area of weakness for me. I won't blame being a psychologist for that, but to me, everything was the interpersonal kind of that's what makes things go. But in fact, the other thing that really makes things go
mhm,
is the kind of money, or as we say, the color of
right.
money that
Mhm,
you're getting and
mhm,
what you can spend it on, and how creative you can be in yeah, making everything you spend really support the kind of goals that you have, that you're not just trying to be nice by giving people, making them feel good, but that you have a plan that really aligns the expenditures with the goals. And, I had good help. My chief financial officer, Vice President Scott Appel's fabulous on that. And I'd say the other thing that's related and wouldn't be a surprise to anybody, you have to create a climate where people are not afraid to tell you that you're making a mistake.
mhm,
And that I needed people to say, uh, "Hey, that may not be such a good idea.
mhm, mhm,
Why are you thinking you should spend money on that?" And to take it as, a learning. I might not always agree. I might go ahead and do it anyway, but to create that environment of speaking truth to power,
mhm,
where I think that is sometimes not part of hierarchical structures
mhm.
in higher
Yeah,
ed.
yeah.
But what I would say to that, that I think it's something that women do well, because several of the things that you touched on are exactly things that Dr. Linda Oubre, who is President Emerita of Whittier College, touched on in her chapter. First of all, she came with a background in finance, so she speaks very strongly of the need to either have and or acquire that financial acumen. And she also talks about the communication part of it and the humility to hire people who have skill sets different from your own, and
Absolutely.
to like that. So she talked about those two things, and she and I have talked about it since then, is that you've got to have and or acquire those financial skills, and that you need to have people like you were talking about in your cabinet member. You need to hire people who have skills and talents that you may not have, and as you said, create an environment where people will come to you and honestly say, this is not a good idea. This is not, and this is why. And I was thinking about, so Lisa, Dr. Conoley, I found after the publication of the book, because there's an example that she gives in her chapter about the decision about whether to reopen the child care center or not during the
Mm,
pandemic.
mhm,
And obviously a critical service for working
yeah.
parents. And it turns out that it is a dear friend of mine and colleague who had been the one who went to her and showed her the numbers and said, as much as we would like to do this in terms of our values, in terms of serving our employees, it doesn't make financial sense right now, and this is why. And she ultimately, at least in that scenario, she made the decision. She listened to those around her. So building teams of people who understand and have skill sets that may not, right? We all have things that we do really well, and we know what our weak areas are, and we can compensate for those. We can do professional
Sure.
development. We can improve our skill sets, but it's just as important in the pacing of work to be able to know this is never going to be my area of expertise. So I'm better at it than I was 5 years ago. But this, I need to call on this member of my cabinet or this member of my team because that is their area of expertise.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I,
Complementary skill sets.
I think, I had to develop also a commitment to ask a lot of questions.
Mm.
Yeah, because I'd been burned a couple of times by not asking the right question, whether it was a follow-up question to a police report about what they'd done
Mhm.
or a financial situation. So, I had to sometimes fight my impulse to be like, oh, there's an expert talking to me, I'm just going to take it. But also actually develop more of a like, but what about this? What
Yeah.
about that? And so it was a little new focus for me to do, but it really has served me well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and all of this really speaks to the type of environment, that psychologically safe environment, when you have
Yeah.
those trusted advisors and they can tell you, yeah, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Right? You have to have, you have to recognize the talent around you, but you also have to create that space for their talent to
Mhm.
actually be useful, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the way to keep them because then they keep moving in their
Indeed.
own professional development too. They take
Yeah.
on
Yes.
more and they feel more responsible and they can take on other tasks and other responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lisa, you have referenced the glass cliff phenomenon a couple of times
Mhm.
during our chat today, and for folks that may not have heard that term before, it's basically when members of any marginalized group, but especially women, were more likely to get in those leadership positions when things are crazy, when things are precarious, when there's a lot of risk, when there's crisis, and then it's those folks are not necessarily set up for success in the midst of those crisis kind of scenarios in which they kind of ascend to leadership. They're not necessarily provided a lot of that kind of wraparound support that leaders would typically get. And so, we are in a moment of crisis in higher ed, certainly not just in the States, but globally, because what happens here certainly is kind of, sending a ripple effect globally. And we're seeing women take the helm during this period. Do you feel that the mandate for these leaders for women of color, folks of color more broadly, queer folks, anyone who is kind of not cut from the typical cloth, if you will, has that mandate changed a bit from growth, this kind of growth mindset to fix it, fix it, fix it now? And how does that shift impact what we think about leadership?
Well, that's a big, broad question.
Yeah.
I will say I engaged in some discussions at a recent Chief Instructional Officers Conference, and we were engaged in discussion at lunch one day around the accreditation commissions and the pivots that they've needed to do in order to not be seized by the government, difficult compromises. It's not speaking directly to what you're saying, Lisa, but I would say I was surprised. Dr. Barbara Gelman Danley wrote the foreword for the book, and in order for the accrediting agencies to remain independent, they've had to make some really difficult compromises and choices around DEIA. So can you repeat the other part of your question? Because that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, has the mandate changed from growth to repair? And then that second is, how does that shift shape the way we think about leadership?
I think for many leaders that I spoke to at the NCORE conference in New York before NCORE was no longer NCORE, it was not even growth to repair, it was growth to holding on. And
Mm,
I think maintaining, um, if you are a leader from a marginalized group, just holding on to your role, protecting the work of your teams is a pervasive theme that I've seen in engaging with women from across the country. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I feel that I'm in a privileged position to serve in a higher education in a community college district in the state of California that has DEIA really woven into the fabric of the institution. I'm in a very unique situation. That is not the case. So I would say for most women leaders, including some who are profiled in the book, they're holding on, have also gone through the title changes that you mentioned. And I think the growth that I see in our community colleges, we are very fortunate to have a very forward-looking chancellor, Dr. Sonia Christian, who really has put adult learners, which is where I live in the higher ed ecosystem, at front and center of the strategic plan Vision 2030. So I feel very fortunate to be serving a president, to be serving a district chancellor, and to be serving a system-wide chancellor where those values, those DEIA values are, despite what we're seeing in the national landscape, and in alignment with Prop 209, which, as Dr. Conoley mentioned earlier, has been part of our landscape in California for some years now, that the work is still moving forward, but it's called different things in different environments. And therefore, I'm speaking as a white woman. But if I were serving in this role in a different district as a black woman, I may not feel the same way. In fact, the racial battle fatigue that you alluded to earlier, Lisa, I think is a much more pervasive theme among marginalized, let's say, women of color leaders or women leaders. I think that is a more familiar. I consider myself very fortunate in this moment.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I would just challenge, it's so interesting. I don't think it's enough to hold on, because we have to, there's some things we need to change. I'll just give one example. When I started, well, it's not even when I started at Cal State Long Beach, it's been a pervasive thing for faculty to kind of look down on continuing education or continuing professional education. That's not quite, what we do.
Mhm.
But actually, there's an area of growth, and I think you just alluded to
Yes.
it. So that so I think it's a both and an and situation. We
Yes.
have to grow. I mean, the
Yes.
demographic cliff is facing us. The attitude of Americans that maybe we don't really need college, birth rates, I mean, the whole thing and the whole kind of anti-expertise
Mm,
context
mm,
that we're living in is threatening. But we have to grow. And specifically for the California State University, the governor, in a compact with the state university system, gave us targets that you have to grow a certain
Yeah.
percentage. And
Yes.
whether money followed that or not is a whole separate situation. And there are things that do need repair.
Mhm.
So like this attitude that only 18 to 24-year-olds
Yes.
ones we should be interested in. That's not, the population of potential learners or people who want to be learners is much greater in the
Yeah.
yeah.
30 to 60-year-old.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have to repair that. We also, we have to repair this kind of siloed um, uh, attitude that, the liberal arts people don't talk to the engineering people who don't talk to the arts people who don't, we can't succeed
Mhm.
as these separate entities that are in competition with one another. We
Mhm.
have to find those threads of where we can create something new that will attract students
Uh-huh.
and push forward unique research areas
Yeah.
that maybe were heretofore not even considered. So I don't I could wax on that for quite a while,
Yeah.
but to
No,
me,
I
we have to grow and we have to repair and we have to listen to some of the criticisms. I noticed for something that's been successful in the California State University um, has been direct admission. 10 years ago, nobody would have said, let's do direct admission for our area schools. Nobody, it wouldn't even have been a deal. And now we found out how getting rid of those barriers of
Mm.
applications and just telling those uh, students in your local school district or community college district, you qualify. We are inviting you to come in. That's a whole different mindset than we have all these barriers. You need to
Uh-huh.
jump through these hoops to get in. And, I'm
Yeah.
speaking from a campus, fortunately, that does not have enrollment problems. We had 125,000 applicants last year,
Mhm.
but we are also looking at that because that's the future.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to touch on the enrollment trends that Dr. Conley mentioned because a practical reason that, among reasons that Chancellor Christian has forefronted adult learners is that is where we are seeing enrollment trends and enrollment growth. So as the 18-24-year-old high school graduate population has dropped through the time of the pandemic, the non-credit adult learner system-wide has increased by about 20%. Additionally, within the community college system, the rate of apportionment for full-time equivalent students is at the level of credit students. So it's a
Mm.
high
Mm.
apportionment rate for what are called CDCP or College Development Career Preparatory Certificate programs. So there is also a financial incentive for community colleges to serve their communities of adult learners while helping their budgets with higher than they may understand to be the apportionment rates for those particular students. So there is a need. We have a very strong emeritus program, as you know, Dr. Conoley's mentioned, 30 to 60-year-old. We have adult learners are remarkable in their diversity. We have many who come from other countries. They may have PhDs, MDs, they may be dentists, but for them to go through their licensing and training would take years and a lot of money. That's another discussion around credit for prior learning. But non-credit offers them a way to do something within one of those fields. And then we have many students that are refugees or otherwise need to learn English as second language. They need quick vocational opportunities where they can take training and get themselves employed in a living wage. So it's a very exciting time to be working in adult education in California. And I feel it is an honor to serve in this role at this time. I'm noticing our time, and I know that we have several participants who were able to make it to the Zoom despite the technology problems that we had. We are recording this session and it will be posted on LinkedIn. I would like to invite them to come off of mic to see if they have a question that they may want to pose. And I am delighted to send each of you a copy of the book for having stuck it out with us here today. If you can contact me with an address. So please feel free to come off of mute if you have any questions.
I love seeing those hearts
Yeah.
float across our screen. That's very nice.
Yes.
Hi.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Hello.
I just
Welcome.
I thought it would be improper to just kind of hang out after just kind of showing up virtually, but I'm sorry I missed it, and I don't know what you all covered, so I don't have any questions. But I do thank you for doing this, and I'll look forward to the replay, and maybe I can reach out individually if I have questions. But I'm sorry I
Yeah.
missed it. Thank you.
No,
Oh,
that's
Love your
welcome.
background, by the way. Love that background.
yes.
Oh yes,
Well, we had some technology issues with the
that's okay.
integration between Zoom and LinkedIn, which was frustrating. So Lisa came up with a good idea to simply record the session, and
Okay,
I
good.
will then in turn edit that, and then we
Okay,
will post the recording so that you have the advantage of hearing the full session. And
thank you.
thank you, Aisha, for joining us. Is there
Yes.
anyone else who may want to come off of Zoom, turn on their cameras, and pose a question?
Hi everyone, my name is Sandy. Thank you all. I finally saw the Zoom link in the comments, so I'm glad that I was able to make it even though I was late. Um, my question, just kind of a really general question. I've been in higher education for about 17 years now, all in medical education. I currently am a director at NYU College of Dentistry.
Oh.
And so my question is how I'm feeling exhausted, as I know Lisa has shared, and quite frankly, defeated to the point where I'm to begin my doctoral education in the spring, and something that I've been looking forward to for many, many years. Waited for my daughter to go away to college, and now she's a junior, and I'm like, okay, Sandy, you need to get this done. But with that being said, also too, I'm just feeling burnt out with everything that's transpiring in higher education since, the new country leadership, and with NYU and Columbia and so much being
Mhm.
happening to us in terms of budget and our research and our funding being taken away, and particularly because I'm in dentistry, the loans are pretty massive that our students are taking out to fund their education at our institution. And so my question is like, although I have a passion for higher ed, hence I stayed in it for so many years. I love my students. They keep me feeling young, I guess. But I'm just feeling very defeated to the point where I'm thinking perhaps this is time to pivot into something else. So do you all go through those, feelings and those emotions? And how do you just kind of bring yourself back to like why, like to your why, or maybe this is a sign to transition and pivot into something else. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
something
Mm.
there. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for sharing that. But,
Yeah.
I'll just jump in and say, I just have to reflect on, I think about the students that I serve. And as president, you don't always get to see students every day, but I think about the stories of life-changing um, that how higher ed kind of changed the trajectory of their lives and their families and then, their communities. So I do, I try to be um, uh, use that as my why. This is why I got into it, to make higher education available. This is what changed my life as a first generation student, that I went from, a kid in the Bronx in a five-story walk up to, living in a presidential mansion because I had an education. So, I'm grateful to have that as a personal touchstone, but also I have to remind myself often, but what about, Maria? What about Derek? What about, remember those stories that when they came to you and said, wow, the fact that I got this scholarship meant that I got to finish my nursing degree. So, that's what I do. I don't know that it's the best, but anyway, it helps me.
Yeah, I would add to Dr. Connolly's comment, Sandy, that I think we have seasons of work, just like we have seasons of our lives. And, I came through a period of just a lot of work. There was just so much of it. And then the political climate, June to September, was really challenging, where I was like, oh, am I making the right decisions here? I really like the people I work with. This is really difficult right now. And I also come back to my why. So I'm a second generation college student. Both my parents were first generation college students. My grandparents immigrated from Russia to Canada. My parents immigrated from Canada to California. I that adage, I come as one, I stand as 10,000. I am Jewish, so I come as one, I sometimes stand as 6 million. But I have the advantage of every day when I go into the office suite where I'm located, I see the families, I see the students of families registering because some of them prefer to register in person. And I realize that the work that I am doing, while I'm not directly interfacing with students, I'm working on behalf of students every single day, resonates very deeply because my own family was transformed in a generation through, as Dr. Connolly said, through education. Right, my dad grew up sleeping on a cot in his mother's kitchen on the north side of Winnipeg, and he passed in early October. He was a pediatric neurologist. So I have lived the story and the power of education in my own family. And so when I get challenged, I do two things. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I do go to my mentors, peers, colleagues. Lisa, Dr. Conoley are among those. I go to trusted advisors at work and outside of work. We have talked in previous sessions that Lisa and I have conducted on the importance of self-care for women in higher education, that you schedule time for meditation, yoga, therapy, wellness, however you may define it, and know that at work, as in all things and in our political climate, this too shall pass. One of my first, my earlier bosses in higher education, when I would get really frustrated, would simply sit me down and say, this too shall pass. And she also pointed out something that I think has helped me, and certainly something that I coach my team on, is that my priority, because we do work in a bureaucratic, unfortunately often siloed environment, my priority is not necessarily the person's priority that I'm emailing. And that I need
Mm.
to understand that it's, I manage a number of early career professionals, and I need to remind them of that they sending one email is not going to necessarily be sufficient, that they may need to pick up the phone or try a Teams message, a different mode of communication, to understand and sort of be accepting that bureaucracy is here to stay, that higher ed is not always as nimble as it needs to be. It often moves quite slowly, but it does move. So if you believe in the work, it's very exciting that you're starting your doctorate. If you believe in the work at NYU and you believe in the students that you're serving and the eventual outcomes while they are slow, then I'd say it's worth it to stick it out. We do have many leaders in higher ed who come from the private sector. And yes, we do have leaders where there's attrition and they may leave higher ed. That's only a decision that you can make personally for yourself. But I would say in those moments of doubt and question, to turn to those mentors, to those trusted colleagues, those peer colleagues, those that you really trust, where you can let yourself down and you can speak truthfully and
Yeah.
honestly and authentically about where you're coming from, and brainstorm, to really engage in that dialogue with trusted colleagues, peers, mentors, in order to make those decisions. Like, is this the best place for me to be? Is it time for me to consider another position? Does it make sense for me to consider opportunities outside of higher ed? Those are the kinds of discussions and decisions I would think that would be made over some time.
Yeah.
I hope that's
I'll,
helpful.
yeah, I'll add, Sandy, that as someone who did her doctorate a bit later in life,
Mhm.
and then in the middle of my dissertation, I adopted a 12-year-old, which was like jumping into the deep end of an Olympic pool while writing. And like you, I work in health professions, which is its own, crazy town. I am often reminded to look backwards and forwards, right? And so in the backwards piece, I'm like, I come from a line of folks that have endured. Don't
Mm.
talk to me about resilience. And I'm sure, like in dentistry, with lots of other, professions, we spend a lot of time talking about resilience, to the point where I think that what we are advocating is toxic resilience.
Mm.
That's a whole other show. But we endure. And what does that look like? And what makes us be able to do that, right? And then I also look forward, and I'm always like, how do I take care of my team? And how do I model self-care for them? How do I teach them not like to be aspirational, to be encouraged, to push forward, but not always in this self-sacrificing mode, which I think is something that women fall into way more often than our male and mask presenting colleagues do. We tend to be like, we'll just, cut off that arm to keep going. And I think that we need to be a bit more introspective, get some hobbies, take off when you can, And, unless you are literally providing the dental care, you are not a first responder. I tell people that on my team, like the work that we do, critically important, but we are not first responders. I need us to take care of ourselves first. And one last thing, and I tell this, and Lisa knows, I do have therapy every week. Not this week, but every week. And I put it on my calendar publicly. And I tell people, like, I'm willing to reschedule it, but just know that it's on my calendar as so others might live because I believe my therapy is a public service. Right? Right? It helps me endure all of y'all. So, and all of this situation that we are experiencing. And so, really try to not just practice kind of self-pampering, which is the spas and all of that, but really taking time to put yourself first and what your needs are, and also recognize that academia and work in academia looks different. I'm not cut out to be at a university. I knew that a long time ago in my career, but I've been in academic nonprofits. And I still teach, I still research, I still do all of these other things that bring me so much fulfillment. But just recognize that, you know, maybe university life, there's some other opportunities out there for you. So.
And that's a really good point that there are lots of opportunities within the higher education ecosystem. I want to dovetail on something that Lisa said, which is I often say to my team, we don't work in emergency medicine. And because I work with a very committed, hardworking team of women who I just greatly admire and adore working with, but things do get tense. We report directly to the chancellor's office, so it is very high stakes statewide level work. And then my boss added something to that, which I love, which is that while we're not saving lives, we're not in ER, we are changing lives. And I think that's a very empowering and kind of energy giving thing that she added. So in those moments of stress, I say both now. We don't work in emergency medicine. We are not saving lives, but we are transforming lives, individual and family lives. So with that, I want to ask our attendees if there's anyone else who may have a final question, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Dr. Conoley, did you have any final comments?
Gosh, we've covered so many topics, but I just say, I this year will be my 50th year in higher ed, and that's not counting the years I spent as a graduate assistant teaching, various courses when I was a doctoral student. As I look at other opportunities, and there are so many, and there's many generalizable skills, transferable skills, I have found joy in purpose. And one of the big things that kept me working till I was 78 was could I find purpose like this in any other profession or in retirement? And so I think, at least for me, it's created a life I'm very grateful for.
Yes. And I remember Dr. Conoley talking about life with purpose at my graduation of my doctoral program at Cal State Long Beach. And it was probably the touch point where I reached out to her after I completed it because it stuck with me then and it sticks with me now that our role is to create a life of purpose and meaning. So I want to thank Dr. Jane Conoley and Dr. Lisa Greenhill so much for this engaging conversation. I want to thank those of you who made it into the Zoom room and those who will be watching this on LinkedIn. Forgive us. We did our best with some technology challenges today, and we are recording the session in the hopes that you will feel free to reach out to us. We can put our contact, I guess we could put our contact in the chat, but I'm not sure if that will translate over to the recording or not, but there is my personal email. So please do feel free to reach out. As I said, those who have joined, if you can send me an address, I'd be pleased to send you a complimentary copy of the book. And please spread the word about this book to others. I wish everyone a wonderful rest of their day, a sweet, joyful, and happy holiday season. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.